Welcome to the Computer Repair Podcast, episode number 300, Burnout. I am your host, Jeff Halash. This is our live show where we discuss the ins and outs of running your computer repair business. Our show today is brought to you by Instant House Call, remote support that is easy for you and your clients to use. You have all the tools you need, including an auto repair feature, which saves you time and money when helping your clients solve their computer problems. Check it out at instanthousecall.com and use the offer code PODNUTS. Let me introduce the co-hosts. We have none other than the great John Dubinsky from the Maven Group. John, how you doing?
I'm just happy to make the cut this week, Jeff.
And also, we have the fabulous James Pinto from OurNerd. James, how you doing?
Wow. I'm doing pretty good.
Very good. And also, we have Mr. Wonderful Ian Alexander from SyncroMSP. Ian, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me on.
No problem. Good to have all of you guys on here. This is a great panel, and we have got a great topic for you today. Well, let's start off with some tips and stories. John, I'm going to kick it off to you. Give us a tip or story that we could learn from.
All right. As usual, a couple quick tips. First of all, I got a little shout lock. I don't know any of you, or a shout out or a shout request or a call to action or something like that. I don't know if anybody else listens to the podcast on the Twit network, but they have a new advertiser called Prylock. And basically what this is security awareness training and phishing simulation, all that kind of good stuff for offices, and their pricing is pretty attractive. What I want to find out is anybody else used them? I'm not really interested in doing that for my customers, but I think it's something I need to add to my stack. So if I could make a couple of dollars along the way and get something good for my clients, I'm just wondering if anybody else has used that. So that's not a tip for you. That's a tip for me, for you to get back to me on. Moving on, a couple other things. I'm a Spotify user and a Roku user. We've talked about all that stuff on the show before. Some good, happy news. One, Spotify is now back on Roku. Two, you can now connect your Roku to your Google Home to control the channels and such like that. And last but not least, if you're a Spotify family user, you can get a free Google Home Mini. And I will have links for all that kind of cool stuff in the show notes. You can get that free Google Home Mini until the end of the year, November 1st until the end of the year. So move quick on that if you're interested in that. And finally, our friends over at Avik. I don't know how many of you have used or heard of Avik before, but I'll let you go check that out, AUVIK. They have a very cool study on the challenges that MSPs faces maybe when you pick up a new network or a new client and you're dealing with their network, about the diversity on that network. And the interesting thing is, like, most of the time they surveyed vendors, or they actually used their software to figure this out, that the majority of the time that if I'm looking through their list really quick, the highest number is like 14 or 15% of their MSPs responded that there's 4 different types of network device vendors on the typical network. But a really interesting outlier is that 12% of the respondents said they had 11 to 20 different device vendors on the network. So trying to manage all that, back up those configs, deal with the firmware, all that kind of fun stuff. It's an interesting article, and I will put that in the show notes in the chat as well. And that's all I got for this week.
Awesome, man. All right, James, let's go ahead and kick it over to you and see what you got for us this week.
Okay. Well, my tip is to, when you are imaging a hard drive that has BitLocker on it, be sure to either disable or pause BitLocker before you image said hard drive. I did that this week. Didn't even think about pausing BitLocker, image the hard drive, threw the new hard drive in, like, oh, shoot, I don't have this key. Thankfully, the client did have the key. I also didn't realize that even putting the old hard drive back in, you still need the key to get it back into that same exact hard drive. So thankfully, customer had the key, was able to get into the hard drive, everything worked out. But just remember, if you're imaging a hard drive to a new hard drive, pause BitLocker or make sure you have the recovery keys ahead of time.
James, that is a great tip. And it's a funny thing because John will laugh, because it happened to me yesterday,
Really?
sitting there with my laptop. And I go, I need to do a BIOS update. There's a BIOS update. No big deal. we're sitting there in our meeting. I'm typing up some notes. I said, let me run this thing. All right. Shuts off, starts back up. And all of a sudden I see the BitLocker screen and I go,
Yep.
John's like, I hope you have that key. I'm like, I do somewhere. Now I just have to find it. Fortunately, I keep that stuff in OneDrive, and it's in a file folder for my own personal stuff. So I was able to go on my phone, which I had, and I was able to log in and find that key. And I'm like, oh man. But to remember that you have to do those things, I don't use, that's the only thing I use encryption on is my laptop, because it obviously moves outside of the house. My desktops and stuff like that, I don't worry about. But yeah, so lesson learned.
Yeah.
Very easy to do. All right. And Ian, what about you for this week?
I have one that's unrelated to tech, but you know, we all sit in front of computers a lot, and I try to get up and move around, you know, regularly. This is kind of a life hack. That's a two birds with one stone thing. If you drink a lot of water, like you have a big jug of water there, you're gonna kind of, and you drink it, you're gonna force yourself to get up because you're gonna have to go to the bathroom, and that is healthy for you, and you're maybe not gonna burn out as bad because you'll probably feel better.
That's awesome. And I actually do that. I have water here. I have a full mug of water all the time, and I drink my water. And when you get to my age, you have to go to a bathroom a lot. So it really, really works well for me. Right, John? All right. So
it's really tough to type and unmute. So, you know, when you're going to ask me a question, lead it and speak slowly. Plus, I'm old. I have to use the bathroom. I'll be back.
There you go. So I will tell you, I don't really have a tip per se, but just one of the things I was telling John earlier. John gave me a couple hard drives, a couple NAS drives out of an old NAS system he had, brand new drives, and I was going to put them in my Synology NAS. And I will tell you that here's the one thing I don't understand from manufacturer standpoint, or even software vendors. Sorry, Ian. But the reality is these things are not as intuitive as you would think that they're supposed to be. You would think, I should be able to swap a drive, you know, pull a drive out, put the other drive in, put the couple screws back together, and the device is just going to be smart enough to know what to do. No, I had to Google it because I had no idea how to repair the drive, which, why am I repairing the drive? Because really, I'm swapping a drive. I understand that this is for when a drive dies, but again, I know it's not really that big of a deal, but it's just something to think about sometimes before you go and do something. And if you don't know how to do it, Google can be your friend. So go and check it out and make sure you find the right information, because there's a lot of information on the internet. A lot of it's wrong. And, you know, every once in a while we have good information that will lead you step by step, or even get a YouTube video. And the other thing too is I don't understand why there's people that actually answer the questions in a way that I can't understand it. I'm like, what am I supposed to click on and do what? So that's kind of frustrating. But again, prepare, and then it won't be that big a deal. And it wasn't. I was able to follow through the instructions as I was swapping the drive out, boom, go back in, remote in, repaired it, boom. Now I know what to do with the second drive, not a big deal. Anyways, prepare. Oh, and look, we have the infamous Paco Lebron from ProdigyTeks. Paco, how are you doing?
Better than good, better than most. How are you?
Awesome, man. You just came into the right spot, because now it's time for your tip or story that you can share that somebody can learn from.
Yes, make sure to check your tire pressure as you're heading out for long trips, because you never know when you're going to have a flat tire. So good times. So whenever you're going on the road for visiting a job and so forth, make sure you check your vehicle, do a 360 all around it. Make sure you have good gas on there, because sometimes you think, I'll get to it tomorrow. And make sure that you do your regular vehicle maintenance, because it's going to be that one job that you can't miss or can't be late for. And that's when it's going to happen.
That is an excellent point. And yeah, it even tells you in your manual, you know, you're supposed to do a 360 check around your vehicle, check the oil periodically, even get a tire pressure gauge down on the tires. And here's the thing, myself included, none of us do it. Even with tire pressure monitors in some of the newer cars, you're still supposed to check that stuff because that might not always relate exactly how much pressure is in there. It's just going to tell you when you've gotten to the point of past or what it feels is too low. So you're still supposed to do maintenance, but
Yep.
okay. Let's go in. We've got some exciting news right here that we are breaking with, and that is TechCon Unplugged, September 20th to the 22nd, 2019. Tickets are for sale. You can go there right now. You can grab your ticket, and I encourage you to do that. Make your hotel reservation. Stay in the same spot that we're going to have the conference in. Everything is going to be literally in one location. You'll be able to wake up, rub the sleep out of your eyes, and get down to the conference room and have a great time. We've got some great things planned with Dave & Buster's. We're going to have dinner over at Dave & Buster's afterwards on Saturday night. We'll have a nice meetup on Friday night where you'll get to meet your favorite podcasters and actually talk to them. And we'll have some exciting things that we'll be talking about as we keep going on. But anyways, go over to techconunplugged.com right now and get your ticket. And I would encourage those, if you're even remotely thinking about it, just go do it. Plus, hey, it's a tax write-off for this year, and you can do the trip on the next year. So hey, there you go. Two birds with one stone. All right, so but yeah, definitely go over there. Let's go into our main topic. And here's what I say: it's better to burn out than to fade away. Some people will know that song, some people won't. Doesn't really matter. Actually, it's from a movie.
What era was that movie in?
What's that?
What era did that movie come out?
When I was a child. It was a song, and I can't remember it. I remember it from the movie Highlander, which was I believe in the 80s. Yeah, when I was a kid. So anyways, but yeah, it's better to burn out than fade away. And that's probably not a true statement, because you don't want to keep going as hard as possible and burn yourself out where you're not only no good to yourself, but you're no good to anyone around you, including your family and friends, et cetera, et cetera. So we want to talk about that today, because this is a real thing that happens with people. And I want everybody to know, here's the thing. A lot of people out there feel that they're the only ones going through these thoughts in their head of when they want to quit, or when they want to, just, hey, I'm done with doing whatever it is I'm doing at this point, whatever that might be. Here's the thing. You're not the only one. There are literally millions of us. As a matter of fact, here's the thing. If you have not ever gotten to the point where you're like going, hey, should I continue to do this? Then you're not doing anything. I don't know what you're doing. Maybe you come home, sit on the couch and watch TV, and that's your life. I don't know. But the reality is everybody goes through this in some form or fashion. So don't feel bad. And one of the good things to do is probably let somebody know, hey, you know what? I'm feeling kind of burned out, and I'd like to talk about this a little bit. And look at your options. See what's good for you. What's gonna benefit you the most. And that's really it's self-awareness of there's a problem and figuring out how to fix the problem. Every problem is fixable in some form or fashion. Every problem. Okay. There's no new problems under the sun. There's nothing that you're going through that nobody else has ever gone through. Sorry, it doesn't work that way. Stuff has been going on since the beginning of time. So it doesn't change. All right. So with that, I want to throw it to John, since he's unmuted. And John, go ahead and lead us however you want into, and I know we came up with a sheet of things, causes, and we also have, we want to talk about the solutions amongst all of us.
Well, I think what I want to do is maybe we'll just list some of the reasons that we determined maybe that burnout occurs, so that we can consider all that. And then we'll talk about some of our solutions on how we felt maybe not alleviate burnout, because I think there might always be some of that there. You just got to learn to manage it, especially in the job that we do. But on how to maybe, not let it push you so far that you're considering something different, or even worse. And I think we got somebody on the panel here to share a story that, at least to me, resonated with me because I've had common instances. But let me just, before I babble on too long, so maybe some reasons for burnout in our industry. One of the big new ones is regulation, all this compliance stuff that we got to deal with. Documentation, that's always a stressful thing, keeping up with that. Customers not taking what we do seriously, or more specifically, maybe even the need for security seriously. Combating the ever-increasing threat from the internet, the constant battle that we have to deal with, not only from the internet, but I'd just say in general. Maybe feeling inadequate in experience, knowledge, understanding of certain aspects of IT. And I would even move beyond IT and say maybe certain aspects of your business, legal, accounting, insurance. Those are all stressors. Not being able to take a true vacation, which I would also lead into the balance of, I hate that work-life balance thing, but that's what we're talking about. If you're a good tech and you're actually invested in your customer success, we're worrying about our customers' data and security, usually a lot more than they are. Being a solo tech or a solopreneur or even a small business owner, you are usually wearing all of the hats and juggling something at the exact same time. And then, just the constant pounding of having to get up every day and go out and kill something to put money on the table. So we're just worn out from always fixing those problems. And in general, my basis before we start maybe talking about solutions is I think there's one foundational aspect that I think we need to start with, and that's you and your own personal well-being, meaning your health. If you're already struggling with some aspects where maybe, I don't know what those things are. We all have those. Maybe you're overweight. Maybe you have some sort of just chronic health thing that you're starting with. That's a burden that I don't think we're going to be able to solve. But maybe we have ways, or I'm sure if you put it on a CRP group or something like that, there's probably somebody else struggling with that kind of personal thing that maybe has some success. So, we're going to talk about the IT and the business aspects today, but we don't want to abandon you if you're struggling with something like that. So keep that in mind as well. And I don't know where you want to start, or Paco, you had a great story earlier today. Do you want to jump on there? And I kind of had to isolate you out, but this is a great example of what we're talking about. And just before Paco tells his story, I've been in the exact same position. So roll, Paco, roll.
Yeah, so I've been, what's the word? Hyped up to tell this story because it's a very personal and dear story of it. So basically the story that John's alluding to is I had an on-site with a client. They started off with, it wasn't going out how I thought it should, and I just knew that it was going to just go for a hell of a day. What ended up happening was, went on site, there was cable thrown, ends needed to be terminated, didn't have the equipment, had to do a lot of back and forth. And then things have been really not going the right way that I wanted it with business. And this client kind of was the straw that broke the camel's back. And it was to the point where you go into a scenario or you go into a job thinking it's going to go one way, and it ends up going a completely different way. At this job, it was to a point where I wasted more time than I wanted to, ended up injuring myself on the job. Not sure if anybody can see there, but basically they had a couple hole saws that were in the closet where the IT was. It was so damn packed that I ended up falling back, slicing basically the teeth of the gave 5 real long slashes to the wrist. It started bleeding everywhere. It just started getting really frustrating. But even with all that, what really got me more was 2:30 came around. I'm calling the client, letting her know that this is just not working. The ends aren't terminating properly. You got to rerun the cable. And then my daughter's mother calls me and says, "Hey, did you pick up your daughter?" And I forgot that my daughter started school that week, and that was my day to pick her up. So the most important part about that is that I never forget anything when it comes to my kid. And that was the one point in my entire business, career, whatever it was, that I genuinely forgot to go pick her up. And I was an hour away So it got to the point where we had to make a mad dash and so forth. So that was the basically end of my business. I was done. It was Labor Day weekend. Basically the first person I called was John. And I basically said, you know what, I'm done. This is it. I'm gonna give myself to the end of to Labor Day weekend. But yeah, no, the point that I got to the point where I forgot my kid because I was so immersed in what I was doing, that was the last straw for me. And so yeah, basically, I had and my daughter was pissed, and it was a whole big thing. What do you tell an 8-year-old that was waiting outside for X amount of time, right? So so the whole weekend I was just pondering, trying to figure out what I was going to do. And at that point, nobody could tell me anything. I was going back to corporate America. I was going to shut down shop and then go from there. But during my call with John, and John could probably elaborate a little bit more on what we had discussed, but basically it was one of those, obviously, everyone goes through that, which I'm aware. But the fact that it happened to you, you take it a little bit more to heart in that type of scenario. And you kind of try to figure out, is it all worth it from what you've done up to that point?
Well, thank you for sharing that, number one, because it's it's not easy for people to necessarily share the things that are close to us, and when we do things with something for with our family or whatever, that can be kind of an emotional thing. And so I appreciate you sharing that. And here's the thing, you're definitely not alone. And I know John elaborated to that a little bit earlier, that we've all kind of gone through these same types of things, maybe not forgetting to pick somebody up or whatever, but it doesn't, but there's still similar things that affect us in our business as far as burnout. And where we here's, I guess, the way I'm looking at it too. And let me ask you this, Paco, because looking back on that situation, is there something that you could have done differently on that day versus, maybe I don't know, when things were going a certain way, could you have made a choice to do something different than kind of just rolling with it and dealing with it as it was coming up?
Yeah. A couple things were, not taking on part of the jobs that have nothing to do with me. So I don't run cable, I don't terminate ends. That's not what I do. And I can't remember before that instance, when's the last time I terminated a cable? So, right now, and what the issue was is that I had a cabling guy before, but he was doing it part time. He wasn't it was hard to reach out to him. So once I walked into this job, there wasn't a cabling guy that I had to be able to call and say, hey, I need you to take care of this. It probably only takes you 15-20 minutes because you do this every day, all day, where I can go ahead and do everything else. But unfortunately, until that one part of the job was done, I could not take care of everything else that I needed to do, deploy APs, the switches, et cetera, et cetera. So that's one, being able to know that that was what was happening, reschedule the job, and basically explain to them, look, I can't do it. This is not what I plan to do. Your email on explaining what I needed to do was not what I understood. We need to get those terminated or hire somebody out. Now I have a guy, so I have that part prepared. Second part of it is once it started not going properly, I should have made sure that I schedule my hours properly to the point where I give enough buffer to, one, get a lunch, which I put in my calendar now. Two, give enough buffer between jobs, 2 hours once back and forth. And then three, making sure that I update my calendar for certain events, which are similar, which what happened was my daughter actually had camp the week before or 2 weeks before. So her schedule in my head was a couple hours later. I never adjusted the calendar. So being on top of your time is the second part that I would say would have probably alleviate some of the issues that happened. And then three, just the work conditions. If you walk into a place and you see this all kind of madness that's happening, you have the right to say, yeah, I'm not doing that. Yeah, you scheduled me then, but I'm not going to do it. You need to move on and kind of go from there. So that's kind of where I think those three pieces, and because as I mentioned, general contractors were putting up windows, they were, putting the floor, they were doing all this other stuff. And it was to a point where, had I seen all this, I would walk into the closet, they got the modem wired up against the wall. I shouldn't have to deal with all that. That should all just be ready for me to get in there, do what I have to do, and not go around other contractors and doing, or at least making enough opportunity or space for me to work where I have to do. So I think those three key points would have alleviated that situation, not getting to the point where it boiled over.
That's good.
And Paco, while you were telling your story, I got to admit I was kind of laughing because I could have been saying the exact same words coming out of your mouth. So I've been in that same position too. But to add on to one of the solutions, Jeff, that you mentioned that we all talked about was make sure that, especially if you're a solopreneur or a small office, that you're not you don't have too many services. Like Paco, and I've done this before too. A customer needed that cabling done because it was scheduled to be done today. So you walk in with that pressure. But if you're not the cabling guy and that's not what you're doing, don't promise that you're going to do that cabling unless you're staffed and you have the time scheduled to do that. Because one, you just added on stress. A lot of guys I see, maybe they do websites. Well, there's guys that run their whole business and all they do is websites. And that can be a lot more time consuming than you think. So, your services list, you can have all those services on there, but do you actually have time to perform all those? Is that going to cut into the missing family time? Is that going to cut into what you do well? If you have a service list of 20 items, maybe you should only be doing the top 5 that you really like. And then maybe website is not one of those things that you're good at, like me. So I farm that out to Alador. Matt gets my business, or, I give that solution to my customer or that option to my customer. Same things with cabling. Maybe VoIP is not your forte. You can handle the network part, but maybe you need a partner to handle the phone system part, so on and so forth. So don't stack up your services list where maybe you're spending so much time on a small service that is such a small part of your revenue and income and profit, but maybe sucking all your time. So make sure you're keeping your eyes open on where your time is and where you're making your money.
Right. And I'll let obviously one of the other guys jump in here too, but exactly like you said, this past month, so mind you, this was Labor Day weekend, so this was September, and this is me trying to figure everything out and all this other jazz. Obviously I haven't closed, so I'm still in business as of right now. But last month actually was the best month that my business had in its entire existence. Before it was January, that had my best month. It exceeded this by well over several grand for that month. And the only changes I did was I limited what I did and I farmed out what I didn't want to do. And specifically cabling, I've been getting quite a few cabling jobs this month. And in normal instances, I turned it away. I have a guy now that he gives me such a great rate. That's his specific rate. And that's his full price, that I have the opportunity to up it a little bit to be the standard in my downtown Chicago area, and basically throw in an hour or two to remotely configure APs and switches, because I use Arachnus and the Overseer products, and I've made several $100s on a job because I'm sitting in my office. It takes me 15-20 minutes to be able to do it with the auto discovery that Overseer has. Go into each individual APs, set up the channels, and I'm good to go. And we've done 3-4 jobs in the past 2-3 weeks, and I made money not just sitting in the office. And those are the type of deals or things that you want to think about, is limiting your services that you can farm out but still make money on. Yeah, you won't make all the money, but as John said, the time and money ratio is what is the part of the game you want to try and figure out.
That's good. All right, so James, why don't you go ahead and jump in here and kind of give your thoughts about what we've talked about so far, and then we'll let Ian, say a little bit, and then John, we'll throw it back to you after that and kind of continue down the list.
Okay. Yeah. I guess for me, the burnout, it's not really anything I can really put my finger on as to one thing that's causing it for me, because I am going through this right now. Kind of just, I'm not sure if I want to keep doing it or not. And I can't really nail it down to one specific thing. Farming stuff out has helped me some. There are more things that I don't do that I do farm out to There's a local security company that I farm that out to now. I actually farm website design out to my brother because that's what he does. So that has helped with some of that, but it's more of just I don't know. Every few days, I'm just kind of like, oh man, I just don't know how I keep doing this, and I can't really nail down a specific thing that's causing it. But that's just kind of where I'm at. I don't know if it's just something that's gonna go away. Next week I'll be okay. What was I thinking? Let's get back to it. I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm at. But yeah, definitely the farming out has helped me a lot. I've been trying a lot harder to have less work to do in the evenings. Where that a lot of that work comes from is if I'm gone most of the day on service calls, all the emails and phone calls are piling up while I'm gone. So that's one thing I'm looking at. How can I maybe solve that problem? Get someone to at least take messages for me so I don't have voicemails. Just things like that where I can maybe bring the workload down after hours. I feel like that might help me out some. Just trying to figure out how to accomplish that is where I'm at.
It's good. And yeah, I appreciate you. Again, these are, this is nothing to laugh at or anything like that. These are real things that real people go through, and appreciate you sharing that. This is something that you're going through. And there are some things that we kind of talked about yesterday, John. But before we get into that, I want Ian's 2 cents on, or 5 cents, 10 cents, whatever, on his thoughts on this also.
Sure. Yeah, first of all, I just wanted to respond to James. There's a service called Ruby Receptionists. You should check them out. They basically answer the phone for you, and you can train them how to do stuff. And it's a pretty good service. And you can spin it up, spin it down as you need. But whatever. Anyway, check that out.
Good tip. What's it called?
Ruby Receptionists.
I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Yeah, they're not going to do your customer service or anything, but they'll answer the phone and take notes, and they're good at it. Yeah, so for those who don't know, like I've been a tech, I've been a computer repair business owner. I was burnt out of fixing computers, so I actually started another business just to automate that. And that spiraled into what I do now. So we make software for computer repair shops, MSPs and stuff. So I've burnt out like a million times, and I have like a whole, I don't know if you can see this, I have like a whole notepad. I didn't even know this was going to be the topic, but I have a whole bunch of stuff. So I don't want to go into all of it now because we should, go through the list. But for me, it kind of boils down to a couple different things. And then like, I won't even go into the solutions right now because I think there's just like, it depends on what it is. But the problems are like 2 big categories. There's like IT specific stuff, which I know is on our list. And then there's like general business stuff that just applies to like any entrepreneurial venture. And for me, those things have boiled down to 5 different like categories within the general business thing. One of them is wearing too many hats. Like just as an entrepreneur, you wear so many different hats and it changes over time. And you're constantly like wearing a hat that you're not comfortable wearing. For example, I didn't know how to do sales and marketing, right? So like at some point I was forced to be in that and learn a bunch in that area. And that's like an uncomfortable thing to not know what you're doing and then to have to figure it out. So like there's burnout that can happen there where you're in unfamiliar territory for like such a long time that it feels like things are chaotic. And then I think another one that people have touched on, Paco and I think John said this, but focus. So like when you're trying to do too many things at once, maybe you don't know how to do cabling or whatever it might be, like being unable to focus because there's so many things going on. That's like another like cause of issues. Another is, for me, this happens a lot, and it's kind of cyclical, but it's when there's so much going on that I don't take time to organize. And then because I'm not organized, I'm less efficient. And that's like a spiral, right? Because you're less organized, you're less efficient, then you're getting less done, and there's more to do. And so it's like, yeah, but it all starts with like not being organized. And then another is like just mundane tasks that I don't need to be doing. So like admin stuff, payroll is like a perfect example. Like unless you're a 1-person shop, like you probably shouldn't be doing payroll. It's just like a bunch of work, and there's companies that do it for you, and it might cost you a little bit more, but then you're not doing that. And then the other one is growing and trying to keep up. So like this doesn't happen if you're a 1-man operation as much, But as you grow your business and it gets bigger, either in terms of the amount of things you're doing or the number of employees you have, it's like a new experience when you get to different phases. And as you're growing, your problems change and you can get burnt out in certain phases if you, like, your personality type isn't a good fit for that particular phase. And so there could be challenges there where if you like don't learn fast enough, your business suffers, and and anyway. So for me, it like boils down to those 5 categories, and there's like lots of solutions in between, but let me just stop because that was a lot.
That was good, man. It's funny. Well, it's not funny. I basically told Ian, and I should probably send him an email. So again, here's one of the things we talk about is, too much to do. And I probably have too much to do. And I know that. My wife tells me that almost every day. But just coming up with all that stuff when I basically told him, I don't know, half hour before the show started, hey, we're changing our subject. We're going to talk about something a little different today. And he comes up with all this stuff. So that's awesome. And that just tells me that this is a real issue that a lot of us, probably all of us, all of us deal with this in some way or another. And so you just need to remember that, hey, you're not alone. I guess that's the best way to put it. John, do you want to go down the list and then we can kind of come up with solutions, or how do you want to handle this?
Yeah, I think what I'll do, I think that's a great idea, Jeff. I'll run through the list of all of our solutions. Guys on the panel, why don't you break out your pen and paper and take some notes, because then maybe we'll turn it over to everybody and they can comment on everything I'm about to spew out of my my food sock, or my food hole. So let's just do that, and then we can circle back. The place we kind of started with all of our solutions is keep in mind that we're the IT guy. We always want to jump to the front of the pack for our customers and say, hey, we can do it all for you. But you got to remember, we're not human resources. We're not their insurance. We're not their lawyer. So we're the IT guy, and that's where we started with. So the first thing we kind of led in dealing with our customers is how do we mediate those disasters and crises that might be causing the stress. So we took the problems our customers call us with, and we broke them down into 4 categories. And what we thought would be a great solution to end day-to-day stress, at least from the guys that are doing the support calls, would be maybe to set your own standard, your own personal SLA in your head, not something that you maybe publish to your clients, but something that just says, hey, I got to do this, and this are my standards, just so that you're not fretting, you're not stressing. So we said there's a disaster. And what we meant by that is the business purely can't do business, and that would be an immediate response item. We moved on to something that is a crisis, which maybe limits the ability for the business, creates some downtime to do business. So we said that would be a 4-hour response. An annoyance, that's when the front receptionist calls and said, oh, I can't print. And then you say to them, well, just go ahead and print to the copy machine that's right behind you. I'll get there. I know you're going to have to swivel around on that chair, but I think you can handle that. And we said that would be a 1 to 2 day response. And then we said there's a task item. That's your task list that you have for the office. Maybe you got a firmware update. Maybe you got anything else. Maybe they asked you to do something and they said stop by during the week or whenever. So, that's just stuff you put on your calendar, and maybe you fill those empty holes on your calendar, or you fill that time in, or maybe it's even special work you need to schedule after hours. And as we made this list, our discussion also went to the point that, there are outliers on all of this. There might be a task or an annoyance that the business owner is asking you to do, and that might be something where you're driving by and you stop in there immediately just because you want to be Johnny on the spot. So, keep in mind there are outliers on this. But we all felt after we talked about this list that, hey, this is our standard. Don't bend the rules for somebody else. This is what you do. And if you do something like this, you're going to be better than 90% of everybody out there. But the final thing we said, though, is no matter what, even if you can't get to that crisis the same day, just make sure you communicate. Just send an email, because that's going to be most people do. And that's, just be the one that answers back. And we also discussed to minimize the above. We said backups are alternatives, not as in a data backup, but maybe do they have more than one printer in the office if they rely on printing so much? Is there a hotspot for an internet backup? Disaster planning. And I like to bring up the point is this is not something you create. You help your customers create it. Because if your customers don't do the work to create it, they won't buy into it at all. there won't be any buying at all. Do you want me to go on to the other points, or do you want everybody to comment on that section before we get into regulation, Jeff?
Yeah, let's go ahead and let everybody, say their 2 cents on that, and then we'll move on to the next part.
Roger that.
Paco, you want to go?
No.
Thoughts?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think those are great points to kind of structure your response time. Obviously everything is with process to be able to do that. So after the weekend we had, I believe it's a good outline or good framework to use. I think specifically the being able to distinguish between showstopper to critical, and critical being that they're impaired by doing business versus showstopper, they can't do business. Once you're able to determine which one of those two, if you're in the middle of something, I think the better you'll be able to kind of address those type of items. Yeah, so that's kind of what I got on that part.
All right, James?
I like that. I like that list. The problem I see for me personally would be sticking to that list and not letting the customer dictate to me that everything is a disaster. I think that'd be my biggest struggle, but I do like that list. I actually wrote that down. Definitely something to ponder on for me.
Well, and I'll add to that though, because we talked about that exact point, James, which I think is smart. And just a small example would be so let's say you're set up to do monthly billing and you bill the customer, and the customer says, well, I want to do annual billing. Well, how much more work does that create for you? And what other vendor is going to do that? Comcast isn't going to do that for them. There's not, Don't let them twist your processes. If you want to move it a little bit and you do monthly billing and you say to them, well, I'm going to still send you a monthly bill and you can hold them for a quarter and pay me quarterly, but I'm not going to change my entire process for one outlier company to create all this work, which then would lead to maybe more stress, which leads to more mistakes, which leads to changing my system. So, it's kind of like Jeff says, there are no emergencies. There are emergencies, I agree. But you can't let the customer push you around, because then you're going to fail other customers.
Exactly. And I think the other thing you need to look at too is if you, and nobody encourages this, John doesn't even encourage this, is having a written SLA, unless somebody is willing to, unless you have the bandwidth, number one, but number two, unless you're willing to, or the customer is willing to pay more money to have you Johnny on the spot. See, if they're paying a certain amount of money to have you available, there's different levels of that. And I think as long as you let them know ahead of time, hey, for something like this is a 1 to 2 day response. For something like this, as soon as possible or whatever. Again, as a one person show. And then the other thing would be is if that customer themselves says, hey, maybe this is not a good fit, because here's and we were talking about this yesterday, is that you will have a lot of companies will move from larger MSPs because their staff, and they have a staff, they have technicians, they go from spot to spot. Those guys take 1 to 2 days in a lot of instances. And so us as single one person shows, we sit there and we try to go, well, wait a minute, I'm going to rip open my shirt and show my Superman chest. And the reality is, but nobody else is doing that. And here's the other thing, you got to protect yourself mentally in the process of doing it, mentally and physically. Hey, Paco, he was a little beside himself and he got hurt because there was jagged things sitting in a closet where they shouldn't have been. And he's frustrated, rushing around, and it slips, and almost we had a little intervention for him. You sure that's what happened, Paco? We just want to make sure that's stuff.
I should have sued him as much as I should have did, but that's another story.
You should have taken, what? Here's the thing. You should have taken pictures immediately of you bleeding and tweeted it. You would have felt 100 times better.
I've actually took pictures of it just in case, but I'm not tweeting it. Fool.
So anyways,
well, keep in mind that customers will take advantage of you to the extent that you let them.
Yes.
If you say yes all the time and you answer, there's a certain point, there's certain customers that if you see the servers down on Friday night at 11 p.m., I'm getting in my Jeep and I'm rolling to that customer site to see what's going on. But, you don't make that a reality for everybody, for the guy that pays you for, every 6 months when you see them once every month and he calls with an emergency, okay, we'll get you scheduled. It's not, your time is your value, period.
And John,
not only to your job, but to yourself and to your family and to your friends and to your relaxation, to your rest, your sleep, your well-being. It's your time.
would you now human nature, would you agree with this, that a customer, even though they might feel irritated in the beginning or they might be frustrated because things aren't working, but if you stand up and say that, most human beings, now if you're not a human being, I don't know what to tell you. Most human beings will actually respect that in a lot of instances, and especially those business owners that own a business, because they're getting stuff from the other side. And so they understand, once you make that clear on here's what we're going to do, or here's what we're not going to do in these particular situations, I feel most people will look at that and say, okay, I don't like it, but I respect it.
Can we have a Matt Rainey moment for a moment? So my response would be, especially if I'm doing hourly, would be Matt Rainey's response. Sure, I'm happy to come out tonight, but keep in mind that it's not $100 an hour, it's $300 an hour. And then you have to pay my travel time, obviously, to your location since it's after hours. Because then when you say that and then you tell your wife, well, I'm going to be gone for 2 hours, I'm going to bill $600 and I'm going to be $50 in travel money. So, I'm going to have $650. I'm going to miss dinner tonight. She might say, well, what are you waiting for? The door can hit you in the butt. We'll see you later. It's not like maybe it's not the proper thing to do. Maybe if you're waiting on your kid's confirmation or something, but then a lot of the times people would kind of relax and say, oh, okay, well, let's get you scheduled later this week or something to that effect.
Yes. And Matt obviously said that all the time.
Right. And obviously, at least I push my business with all of my clients because they're all valued, that I always try to give them my best effort. But, I work for a lot of dentists and they don't work that way. They have to take emergency stuff and all that kind of stuff, and they do that, but it's not at 11 at night, and that kind of stuff. So, you got to be careful to not do things that they don't do in their own business, I guess is my point.
And I would gather
can I
to
add a tip in there?
Yeah, go ahead.
So like one thing you can do, it's sometimes hard because you as the the engineering tech part of your brain wants to solve problems for people, and I remember I always felt guilty if I had to tell somebody no, I can't fix this till 2 days from now. But one this is that's to a certain extent you kind of have to think of it as a you problem. It's my fault, I feel bad about that. So how do I how do I get around that? And so one hack you can kind of do is you can develop these a policy, right? And it's here's my policy for this thing. And you don't have to say it even if you're a one-man operation, you can say, here's our policy for this type of situation. And then they can get mad at your policy, but not at you, if that makes sense. You're kind of diverting the emotional energy away from you as a person to the policy. And then if they're why is your policy that way? Then you can do exactly what Jeff just said and said, well, we're human beings and we have to make sure that we have work-life balance. You can kind of explain why the policy exists that way. But I really like the concept of taking away the anger and putting it on a policy, because then people can have something to divert it to that's not you.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah, and and like you said, you can weed out a lot of the crazies and the craziness with a policy. I told a story whenever I was on a couple weeks ago where I had a potential prospect wanting to have me go on site to his on site to his office, but the bigger issue was I didn't know if it was a good client. He didn't want to talk about it on the phone, and I want to know what type of business, I want to know what I'm getting myself into before I go on site and waste my time. And he would not want to pay for me to go on site because that's the IT discovery. So if you don't want to pay an IT discovery, then we can talk about what you need on the phone. And he just did not understand that process. And he was trying to understand, in his head, he was trying to understand why I wouldn't go to see him on site. And I kept diverting it to, no, this is how our process works. This is our policy. Phone call, IT discovery. You're going to pay us if we're going on there because you can't explain to me what you need over the phone.
Yeah, that's good. That's real good. All right. So, John, do we have anything else on the list there? Or where do you
Yeah,
want
we
to
got
go?
quite a bit more that we can run through there. One of the things was maybe feeling inadequate. As an entrepreneur, my statement would be, you get put in this position a lot. So, Jeff, your comment when we were talking about this is, if you don't feel inadequate, you're not doing something right. Because, the challenge is that, we have to investigate, discover new things. We end up places where one of these days, I'll tell you my story about getting electrocuted on a ladder and wetting myself. But anyways, um, but uh, you know, those are the types of positions as an entrepreneur that you're going to get put in. Whether that's the first time you get sued, whether it's the first time you realize, oh my goodness, I might not make payroll this month. Those are the bad things. To the total opposite, when you have the elation of winning a big deal, bringing home your first paycheck, being debt free, whatever those kind of things are, those solutions. So, the inadequacy thing, I think, is just part of being the entrepreneur. So our solution there was, hey, you got to kind of deal with it, because that's just part of being a business owner and an entrepreneur. We didn't really have there's ways to mitigate that probably. Surround yourself with professionals. One of the big answers we had to all of these things is doing exactly what we do in our, is find some of the guys in your area with like-sized businesses, like-size mindset, and, start meeting with them once a quarter. Get to some of the conventions that we do that are of value. If you can do that, and if not, at least try to maybe participate in, like the CRP group. That's a good place where you could bring up topics like this. And I think we're all pretty open-minded and responsive to that. So that was about inadequacy, and I'll add one more on so that we can get comments from the other guys. Was the regulation and security. And both of these, I go back to that you're the IT guy. So I'm going to pick on HIPAA because that's what I do, or I'm involved with a lot of it. I'm not responsible for my customers' HIPAA compliance. Is there an earthquake over there in Detroit?
What in the world?
I'm not responsible for my customers' HIPAA compliance. That's not my job. My job is to help them reach compliance with the IT stuff I do. So the HIPAA rule has 8 pages out of the 100 or so that are in the HIPAA rule that deal with IT. So my job is to fulfill their needs. Now, I might direct them. I will consult with them on what I know. I will work with whoever they're working with to meet the standards that we need, policies, procedures, but I'm not writing their disaster plan. I'm not writing their breach recovery plan, the breach remediation plan. That's not my job. I'm the IT guy. All right. Now, if somebody wants to engage with me and pay me to do that, there's a lot of legal responsibility and all that. So make sure before you promise that you're going to do somebody's HIPAA compliance or any compliance or whatever regulation they need to meet, you're taking the burden on of all that responsibility. And I would say the exact same thing about their security. Your security stacks that you demand when you bring on a contractual client as an MSP, that's your basis. Don't do anything else until you have that baseline of mitigation. But if they're not willing to buy a full-fledged UTM, if they need a FIM and they won't pay for that money, all you can do is give them quotes and options, and make sure that you have that documented so that can't come back at you. And then also make sure that if you're an all-you-can-eat guy like I am, if they do that, don't cover that in your all-you-eat. That's extra billing, because they didn't do what you said was, that sort of thing. Because otherwise you'll be chasing that kind of stuff to no end if it doesn't meet some sort of standard. If that makes any sense, I'll let the other guys comment on that.
All right, Paco.
Kind of everything what he said. I think it's there is, like you said, you want to know where to get yourself into, and you want to know what not to get yourself into. I think all of us try to do good by our customers, but at the same time we got to protect ourselves. And when we get ourselves in the middle of something that we shouldn't be, could cause a lot more stress and a lot more unwanted communications to us about these things when we should have been involved in the first place. So I think having those, those terms, having those agreements, and being able to plainly state what it is that we do can help guide that conversation if it comes up.
It's good. James?
Just back to the HIPAA thing, that is one thing that I had struggled with a lot. The fear of HIPAA, basically, is what I'll call it. I
have a lot of that, James, so I'm with you.
I'm actually working with a company now that's walking me through both my compliance, making sure I have all my documentation, and then they can also work with my clients directly. So that has helped a lot on that aspect. I feel like that's taking a big weight off my shoulders, making sure I'm compliant, making sure that my customers know if they want to be compliant, they need to do all the stuff that this company is telling them to do. And I'm more than happy to help them do that, but that company tells them what needs to be done.
And I think you had your wise words there, James, were making sure that you're compliant. If you had any stress about HIPAA, it's just make sure you're compliant if you're dealing with it. And your customer's responsibility that they're compliant, and you help them reach that compliance.
Yeah, once I kind of realized that I can only worry about mine, and actually from my standpoint, the HIPAA compliance is actually pretty easy to achieve. So once I realized that took a big load off my shoulders, just that aspect there.
And this is also something that people need to think about too when it comes to HIPAA. And I understand there's PCI compliance, there's compliance, and you're probably going to have compliance in a lot of businesses that you take on. But maybe this is something that maybe it's not what you niche down to. Maybe you do other things that don't have that compliance thing that you need to do on a regular basis. So, you got to look at that. Is it more? How much more work now? Now, James, you're dealing with it great because you have an outside company coming in to help you with that and to make sure that the rules are being followed, and then they're giving the information to your customers. And then again, that all falls back on the customers. Like John said, hey, they're either going to do it or they're not. And again, that's up to them.
And before I found that company, I was to the point where I didn't want any more medical clients, and I was considering dropping the ones I already had. Now that I got that figured out, I'm okay with it. I'll bring some more on at this point.
Good. All right, Ian, your thoughts?
Yeah, you guys talked a lot about the HIPAA compliance stuff, so I'll talk about the first thing that John talked about, which was being uncomfortable, is a way I would phrase it. So entrepreneurship is interesting. I think that it depends what you're trying to get out of your business. So are you trying to have a business that like makes you money and like doesn't need to grow? Because some people are totally fine with that, and they like have their business and it works for them and it's fine. Personally, I can only speak for myself. I really love learning, and that's one of the things I'm driven by. And so for me, it's interesting to have a business that grows. So I want it to change, and I've had to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what I've realized is that every time I get comfortable in a role or a hat or a set of hats that I'm wearing, that probably means that we're not growing fast enough. So that's when I'm like, okay, time to think high level and like step out of what I'm doing right now, schedule time to think high level, because if I'm not uncomfortable, then we're not doing something new, which means that we're not growing. And so I'm lucky because what I like to do is learn, and I'm driven by that. So like being uncomfortable is like a learning opportunity for me, which is like energizing. That doesn't mean it's not stressful, but it can be energizing for me. So I think that's one thing. At the same time, I think one of the things that's super important, and again, John talked about this, it's having advisors, because if you can't talk to somebody about the issues you're having, then you're probably just going to make the mistakes they've already made. So if you can find people that have made the mistakes that you're probably going to make, then that's great. If you can't find anybody like that, computer repair and MSP stuff, like it is a specific industry, but business is business, and there's a million business books out there that talk about all kinds of problems, and you can probably find one that's like what you're trying to do right now, and you can learn from that book or 3 books about it or whatever. So there's resources out there for you to not feel overwhelmed.
That's good. I like that. That's again, it's the thing that's what I look at what we do in this business, and we are some smart people. And the thing is, a lot of us don't think we're as smart as we are. Now, John will tell you that I think I'm smarter than, than I should be, but whatever. The reality is the things we do are amazing. And you can tell that by when you say something to a customer and they have no idea the words that are coming out of your mouth. You just look in the mirror after that and go, I am amazing. I do some wonderful things that these people can't figure out. That's why they hired me, because you're the expert in that room, even if you only know a little bit more about a subject than the next person. That makes you an expert because you've got more information. It's not this big wordy thing. So sometimes you got to look at yourself in that respect and go, you know what, I know what I'm doing. And if I don't know what I'm doing, I'm going to find somebody else that can help me with what I'm doing, or I'm going to figure it out. A lot of times on the job, they go, hey, we need this done right now. And I look at them and go, yeah, we'll get it done. Hey, you know what? Let me tell you this. Impossible might take a little bit. The hard stuff we do all the time. But the impossible, we'll get it done. Just might take just a little bit longer.
My favorite thing is when the customer says to me, yeah, we're going to be closed over Thanksgiving Day and the day after, so you can come in and do it then. And I'm like, nah, I'll be watching the Lions lose and eating turkey. So,
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you, wait, what do you, well, John, you've always said this. What do you do? You tell your customer, what are you doing on that day? Oh,
what are you going to be doing then?
Yeah. I'm going to be hanging out with family and eating turkey and watching football. Right. And you go, do you think I'm I'm a human being. I do the same things you do. How hard is this, people?
No, every man has a price and every business does, and depending on how things are going, the wife might help you come pull cable on Thanksgiving Day for the right price. So,
absolutely,
balance all that. We all want to do best efforts for our clients, blah. But yeah, blame the policy. I like that, Ian. High five. So we are closed on Thanksgiving Day. You're closed. You're closed. Yeah. All right. You got to rest and recharge too. So, and if I can, Jeff, I'm going to take the reins and just tie that right into the next thing we talked about, especially for solopreneurs, was vacation time. It can be really hard for us. I was blessed. I just took a nice long vacation with my family, 18 hours away from my home. So I was totally in a different time zone, and I was gone for 13 days. And the way that I manage that is doing a lot of things that we've talked about already, but I have a partner locally. One, I have three guys that are in my mastermind group that would all drive and take care of me. And then I have a local company that is much bigger than me that would cover me in the terms of disaster. And really the way that I handle it is before we go on vacation, no matter what, is I take a look at either the time zone or something like that. So if we're in the Eastern time zone where I live, that's easy to do, but we would happen to go to Hawaii on vacation. So that changes things a lot. So before I even went, I decided, and I already planned out when I was going to spend a little time in front of my laptop, responding to emails or either passing on urgent, not disasters or crisis or annoyance items to partners that might need assistance, or just responding to my clients to say, hey, yeah. The other thing that I'll get to that, the other thing that I also do is tell a lot of my clients, they know I'm a solo tech. They also know that I do have backup in the case of disaster, but also give them plenty of notification that I'm going to be gone. This does not stop them from emailing me asking to change the color of something on some dashboard or something while I'm gone. But then when I kindly remind them, they'll say, oh, yeah, sorry. Or, oh, a lot of my clients are good. But, again, I go back to exactly what Ian said. It's, what is it? Piss poor planning leads to poor performance. The 5 Ps. So, plan out your vacation, find somebody that can back you up, a trusted partner of some kind. And a lot of the times, it doesn't even cost you to have a backup because you'll just trade that backup with somebody else that might be a solo tech. Hey, cover me while I'm gone. And then when you're gone, I'll cover you. And we'll just do that. Your clients are your clients, my clients are my clients, but we're just taking care of them. So vacation, I'll add onto that, and I'll let other people jump in.
Paco, vacation?
What's that? Yeah, no, I think I truly have not taken a real vacation in quite some time. However, I do take a lot of work trips to help refresh myself doing all that. So I'm still working. But again, kind of like what John said, I do have backups in case something were to hit the fan, like I'm out of pocket or I just can't get to it because I'm at a conference or something of that nature. So I do have backup. So having backup is really key. And I do have an answering service that picks up all my calls anyway. I use a company called Go Answer, and they do just that. They take the call, write the message, and go from there. I actually stopped using them for a while because my co-working space offered it at one point, but then when I transferred offices, their sister company didn't have that anymore. So I ended up going back to them. And what I realized is having the answering service has really increased a lot more discovery of people wanting to leave a message than leaving a voice message. And just those two pieces alone have really helped me get enough control or coverage that I need while away from my business in some way, shape, or form.
That's good. And Paco, I want to go back to something here real quick, and we'll move on to the other gentleman. But in your crisis, this time that you had that you're like, hey, I'm done with this business. Let me tell you something. So what came out of that after you went through this whole thing? You talked to John. John talked you down off the ledge, and you kind of you took the weekend to figure out what you're going to do. What actually came out of this?
What happened during the weekend or after the fact?
After the fact,
Okay,
when did
'cause I
you
was gonna say
contact me? Yeah,
censor minute 58 minutes and 14 seconds. No, I think what ended up happening was I was still beaten by the business because what it was is that it wasn't that incident what caused me to second guess the business. It was a long string of things that had happened. Um, and I'm being vague because I'm going to share all this when I record my episode of Tech Life that I'm hoping will come out Tuesday. Is there were a lot of things that happened for 67 days prior to this incident, and they were all specifically that affected me on a mental note. That this was kind of the breaking point in that avenue. So what I did was once I shut off the phone and just basically said, screw it. Um, After reevaluating, I was still in a funky mood as of Monday. And what ended up happening was I actually stopped doing business during business hours and focused on something else I like to do. And by me doing that allowed me to just get in a better spirit, and by doing that allowed me to then transfer that back into my business to say, okay, because I'm always a problem solver, I always want to tinker. That's the whole purpose of being in this industry. You want to solve problems. All right, how do I crack this nut? How do I figure out what the heck went wrong? And that allowed me to move forward into the end of September, all of October, to get into a better space that I'm looking to be in.
well, and not only that, but then you contacted me and said, hey, by the way, I want to throw a conference.
Yes, that's exactly. So if we want to go into details, specifically on what happened, essentially what happened, I basically said, F the business. I wasn't going to do anything about what I was going to do. And I had just recently joined back with Matthew Rodella over at the Computer Business Marketing Show. So I got back into doing that podcast. It was great to be reacquainted. And as everyone knows, I handle a lot of the relationships and partnerships for both the Podnuts Network and on the Tech Site Builder Network as well. So I hadn't done that in quite some time, and being able to rub elbows with the businesses, trying to have community invested sponsors and partners involved in what we do. And I realized I forgot on how good I was with that, and was able to get somebody who wanted to be invested in the Computer Business Marketing Show and that sponsor. So by me doing that, made me realize that I had unfinished, let me rephrase, me and you had unfinished business with this conference that we've been wanting to throw for the past 2 years, which then made me say, okay, I've now reinvested myself back into the community with the Computer Business Marketing Show. I love being able to do this. I want to get back into doing what I do before. I felt from me and you and our conversations before, which is kind of part of the stuff that I referred to on the previous weeks, that it was owed to our audience to do something for them, which is why I called you to say, we're going to do this thing this year. And that's kind of where it went from there.
And I'm an idiot and don't know how to say no. So apparently there we are. So no, but here's what I'm.
Isn't that on our list? Know when to say no?
It should be if it's not. But here's the thing. What I wanted to point out was that there's positive things that sometimes come from the tribulations that you go through. And so going through these things is not always bad like everybody thinks. There's a lot of things I've been through in my life. I've lost more real estate than most people have in their entire lives. Whatever. And people look at me and go, how does that not get you down? I'm like, what am I going to do? Am I going to roll over and wet on myself? That's not going to do myself any good. I'm going to be all wet and yucky and I got to change my clothes. And what's the point? I said, it was a learning experience. I learned what not to do in this particular case. And I said, okay, now let me go do something differently than the way I was doing it before. Again, life lessons, learning experiences, whatever you want to call them. I think they're important to the growth. And not only that, but new things come out of these things sometimes when they happen to you. And again, here's a prime example. Paco goes, hey, let's do this. And I'm like going, that's like the last thing in the world I want to do. But he's like, no, come on. And I'm like, okay. Whatever you say, Paco.
And we've been like a pit bull with a baby ever since.
Yeah, so it's the right thing to do. And I know that. It's just, yeah, we're all busy, but this is something we want to do. So anyways, I want to bring that out. That something good came out of the ashes anyway. All right. So James, vacation.
Yeah. Still struggling with that quite a bit. So if anyone is in the Hutchinson, Kansas area that might want to help me out some, hit me up. But yeah, I've been looking for someone to I can hand off on to so I can take some time off. I've taken a few days here and there, but you're not actually off. The phone rings, you get emails constantly. But yeah, there was one company that's in my area. They said they wouldn't do it because they got burned by someone else in the past. And a couple other companies around here have a pretty bad reputation already, so I don't really want to work with them. So I'm still trying to figure that out. So like I said, yeah, if anyone's in my area, hit me up. Might be able to work something out with you.
All right. That's good. Ian, vacations?
Yeah, I didn't take one for like the first 4 or 5 years.
Oh, don't tell people that.
No, I didn't. But then I met my wife, and she's really good at that whole work-life balance thing. She's also an entrepreneur and forced me to. So that was really good and healthy. And I think also your company kind of has to be in a position where you can do that. Like you have to set it up so that you were just talking about that, James. You have to set it up so that you can take a vacation. And I think kind of part of it is actually scheduling it. It's a funny thing where if you schedule time to relax, I have to do this a lot. I have to schedule time to go play basketball, which is a funny, it's literally on my calendar. And then I've reserved time for it, and then I have to do it because it's on my, if I live by my calendar, then I can actually be a little more healthy. So if you schedule time, I'm going to be out these 2 weeks in February or whatever it might be, you'll find a way to make it work. You're smart enough to figure that out if you're given enough lead time. So I don't know. That's always worked for me. That being said, I want to admit that I was horrible at this before, and it's gotten easier as our company has grown and I've replaced myself a bunch of times. It's still hard for me to take time off, but it's become easier because we've forced that to happen.
Yeah,
That's good.
I second that. Calendar and having someone that you care about to push you to a point to be able to do these type of things. You know, as I said, I hadn't taken a vacation and I don't know when, and I've since scheduled one for February because of that push and consistent. This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. This is what we're doing. And like exactly like you said, to figure out, all right, how am I going to make this work? So yeah, calendar, and you gotta love your loved ones.
Yeah, and hey guys, let's just say on Friday, just leave at noon and turn your stuff off. I mean, disappearing for a half a day is your business is not. No matter what happens, I mean, you might turn your phone back on Saturday morning or something and wake up to a small nightmare. But I mean, it's only half a day, but it's your time. Just turn it off.
Yep.
That's what I was going to say too. You know, you could almost do a staycation, a mock vacation, and block that time off. And I believe firmly in. We were talking about this weekend, John, with the to-do lists that they're worthless and they don't do anything other than they give you this endorphin feeling when you create it, never to look back at it again, or when you look back at it, you get frustrated. But when you put something in your calendar, guess what? It's there. It's like, hey, this time's blocked out. I have, things I'm like, hey, when I got to go to the chiropractor, I got to put that in there to make sure that I'm there. If I've got to do editing for this podcast, guess what? That's in there. All these things that I do on a weekly basis, my calendar is filled up with a bunch of stuff, but that's basically me making time. No different than if you're doing marketing or anything else for your business. Schedule the time, because here's what will happen if you don't schedule the time on your calendar. You won't do it. Let's just be real. So these are definitely some things that we can all get better at this. And the other thing too, John and Paco, is that one of the things we discovered, we have all these problems to solve in our business. And part of this getting together on a semi-regular basis was to kind of learn from each other, make this a better way to do things, whether it was documentation, whether it was, onboarding, offboarding, different things like that. In reality is we put a lot of good things on paper and we just felt overwhelmed. It's like, wow, there's a lot of stuff that we got to deal with. So we've come up with a plan now to break this down and to focus more on the most important things, to take care of those. And so again, this is really, this is like taking care of yourself 101, and everything everybody has said so far really points to you. If you are no good to you, you are no good to anybody else. And I said that in the beginning, and that is just a fact. And you have to realize that. And I should do this, and I don't, and I probably should, but I should schedule time for me to do things that I enjoy. That could be fishing. It's not. I hate fishing. It could be hunting. Yeah, same thing. Playing video games. I love doing that. So there's things that I could do, that I could schedule my calendar where I'm going to take this hour of time and it's about me time, or I'm going to take this hour of time and I'm going to spend it. It's about me and my wife's time, or I'm going to take this hour of time and it's in me and my kids' time, or whatever. Again, if you do this often enough,
don't discount the 20-minute break. So you come home to pick up a part and your wife's there, grab her hand, go around the block. Do 20 minutes just to decompress really quick. Even if you're going to make yourself 20 minutes late, you're going to be that 20 minutes better by the time you get there.
Yeah.
And then, the ladies like that little thing, or your partners like those little things too. But Jeff, we're getting to 90 minutes, so I'm just going to wrap up with the last couple points we had, if I can.
Yep, go ahead.
I just stole this one from Marvin B in the chat. He was talking and he put in there, this is awesome. He has a policy that if the customer's closed, we're closed. So I kind of like that. That might be a great one. To alleviate a lot of stress, we said standardizing in your business, standardizing on products alleviates a ton of stress. Documenting correctly, efficiently, and thoroughly would alleviate a lot of stress. Use your vendor support. Partner with vendors that can be a team member. Ecliptics is a good example of that with their firewall supports. Don't let your customers treat you different than other businesses or than they treat themselves. You know, their demands might be higher than they deal with their own customers. Obviously, we always give our best effort, but just be careful of that service creep. Reach out to other techs, try to build a group. I mean, depending on your area, there might be 100 other guys that just love you, or maybe like James, maybe he's the best tech in town, which could very well be. You know, so he might have, you know, he might have to travel. Maybe we got to get him up here in Michigan or something. But prepare to be efficient, as Ian said. Prior planning, you know, that's important. And the final thing we said is just say no. Know when to say no. Use your spider senses, use your business skill, and say no. Say no more often.
I like that. All right, let's go ahead and let's go around the table and let's have a wrap up thoughts. Paco, you're up.
Do what you feel is most comfortable, and if it doesn't feel right, just don't do it. I mean, that's going to be the easiest way for you to understand that what you've advertised, what you want to do business, and then outside of that, if you figure out that I just don't want to do this anymore, this allows you to reevaluate what do you do want to do, and maybe it is an industry change, or it's a service change. So it's kind of making these small changes tend to make the bigger results versus doing something very drastic, and then you get that that feeling of, man, I really probably shouldn't have done that, and you want to go back to it. It helps alleviate that part that you're trying to figure it out.
It's good. All right, James.
I think what I got from today is I just need to keep saying no. I think we talked about it in the last show I was on. I just need to say no more often, I think.
That's good. Yeah. It's tough. It's something that you have to learn over time. And that's why I talk about self-worth all the time, because you have to know your own self-worth. And I think a lot of times, I don't know why, but this industry gets treated differently than an auto mechanic or a plumber, or it's crazy to me. But whatever. All right, Ian.
Yeah. Okay. So I think when you're burnt out or when you have a problem in general, one of the keys is awareness. So recognizing you have the problem is most of the battle, because usually you can solve it once you are aware. And there's like a hack that I have over time come to appreciate, which is the naming of things. So once you have a name for a particular situation, it's easier to recognize that that particular situation is happening, as opposed to like an abstract, like, oh, like there might be a problem over there, but if you can name it. So for example, you guys are talking about turning down opportunities. I have named for myself, it is really hard to turn down a good opportunity. It's easy to turn down a bad opportunity, but it's hard to turn down a good one. And once I like kind of name, like that sentence is a name to me. And now when I'm looking at a situation, I'm like, is this a good opportunity that I should turn down? Like, am I tempted because this is a good opportunity? So I named that thing, and now it's easy for me to be aware and notice that it's happening. And you can name all kinds of different things. So when you have an issue and you like can't really figure out like, why am I feeling this way? Like, take some time to try to give that thing a name and like figure out what it is. And then going forward, you're going to be more easily aware, and then you can solve it.
That's really good. That's good. Yeah, it is. That's awareness and naming things. Wow, that's a gold tip right there. That's worth every dollar you spend on this show. Speaking of, if you'd like to support this show, go to patreon.com/computer repair podcast. And I want to thank all of our Patreon supporters for your continued support. We appreciate everything that you do for us. And that also gets you into the secret Facebook group where you can hang out with a lot of people that are in this panel here. And everybody is nice. There's no backbiting. There's no, you don't know what you're talking about. There's none of that. Because if that happens, John or Paco will kick you out of the group without me even knowing. They have that power. And I gave it to them. So anyways, I appreciate everything that everybody's brought to the panel today. This has been, I can't even believe it's been an hour and a half, John. This is just, we could probably go on for many more hours talking about this. And maybe this is something where we'll come back and talk a little bit more about maybe some other things that we can help others with. If you're struggling in an area, and you have, you know, if you're feeling this burnout or whatever, feel free to let us know. You know, if you just need to kind of get it off your chest and talk to somebody about it, or like John has said, you know, find somebody in your area that you can meet with, or at least give a phone call to. But we're not judgmental here whatsoever. Hey, people go through stuff, and that's why the power of community is, to me, the most important thing. So, all right, so let's go ahead and Ian, let people know where they can find you at.
They can email me, Ian@SyncroMSP.com or Ian@RepairTechSolutions.com or Ian@RepairShopper.com. Any of those go to the same place.
That's awesome. All right, and James, let people know where they can find you at.
Yeah, they can find me in the Facebook group, and they can email me at james@OurNerd.com.
Awesome. And Paco, let people know where they can find you at.
They can find me over at the Computer Business Marketing Show every Thursday at 7 o'clock Eastern Time with my good friend Matthew Rodella as we go Facebook Live discussing different ways for computer businesses to market their business.
Awesome. And last but not least, my stalwart cohort.
That's all I get, a stalwart cohort?
Stalwart. I don't even know what those words mean. I just kind of just picked them out of the air. Kind of like what you do when you do pricing, John.
Hang on a second. Can you spell that for me for the show notes? Stalwart cohort. Hey, I'm at john@mavengroup.net. I'd love to see more and more people in the Computer Repair Podcast group on the Facebook group. On the Facebook, man, I'm showing my age, and in the chat. But hey, waking up every morning, it's not like winning the lotto. But if you don't have any passion for what you're doing, at least a little bit, you know, the other consideration we didn't talk about is maybe it is time to make a change. So you got to evaluate that. But you know, don't give up. Everybody has bad days, and you know, if you needed some help getting through it, I think you got 5 guys here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that are willing to help, or at least willing to listen, tell you you're crazy, or tell you to move on, or at least give you our 2 cents. And like Jess says, you get what you pay for.
Wait, my 2 cents is worth more than your 2 cents, though.
I don't know about that.
If you know how to add, I'd believe it, but I doubt it. So keep going.
1 + 1 is 3, right? Okay. All right, come join us live for the Computer Repair Podcast every Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern over at podnets.com/CRP Live. Join in on the conversation by hanging out in the chat room where we have people that are going back and forth and having a good time. You can send an email to podnets@podnets.com, and with your permission, obviously, we will read it on the show, or unless you tell me specifically not to read it on the show, it will probably get read on the show, and we'll answer the question or listen to the comments. You can leave a voicemail. Yeah, your voice, 734-335-1000. I want to thank everyone for listening and subscribing to the show. We'll see you next time on the Computer Repair Podcast.